I'm vengeance.
Retributive justice is a very compelling theory of justice that focuses on the punishment of wrongdoers rather than rehabilitation. This desire for eye for an eye justice makes for some very satisfying scenarios in film, where we get to see someone suffer in the same way they caused others. This type of punishment can't always be enacted in the real world, so it's become extremely popular in our entertainment. We all like to see people bend the law in order to get revenge or apprehend someone who escapes law enforcement. It seems that in almost every police drama, there's a scene where they don't have a warrant to get into someone's house, but they know they did some heinous crime, but just can't prove it legally. So they ignore procedure and bash through the door because it's the only way to catch the criminal.
Did you hear that?
Is that the sound of you not needing a warrant?
There are also plenty of scenes where they torture a suspect to find out information to save lives. It seems we like, and even expect law enforcement to break their own laws in movies, but would have a problem with it if they did so in real life. Maybe you wouldn't have a problem with them breaking those specific laws, but granting that much more power to people on a grand scale just doesn't seem like a good idea. I want to explore moral frameworks that entangle around retributive justice and ponder on why vigilante retribution is so satisfying. Real quick, I want to make sure that you understand my intentions. In previous videos, people have attributed me bringing up an argument or rebuttal to a topic as my own opinion. Oftentimes, I'm steel-manning ideas and acknowledging common beliefs that naturally stem from what I bring up. So just because I bring up an opposing argument or ask a question, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's my actual belief. But I have to address other positions to cover the subjects. I'm trying to analyze my own beliefs while writing this, so I'm not trying to give definitive resolutions for every topic I bring up, but the active discussion is needed to hopefully spark critical thinking.
Now, the good part about frontier justice is it's very thirst-quenching. The bad part is it's apt to be wrong as right.
Retributive justice is a moral theory that focuses on making an offender suffer in proportion to the way they made others suffer in order for justice to be enacted. Let's examine how this thought process might be justified by analyzing the situation Tony Hastings is presented with from the film Nocturnal Animals. Through a series of horrific events, Tony is separated from his wife and daughter by a redneck-type character, Ray Marcus, and his buddies. They end up raping and killing his family and are able to get away with it. Some time passes and Tony comes back into town to try to identify the murderers. Since so much time has passed, there isn't much evidence to be found within the confines of the law. A detective there named Bobby offers him an opportunity for revenge. As the audience, we've witnessed much of the trauma Ray has caused, and we're frustrated to see him escape consequences. Once the detective captures Ray, Tony hesitates on what exactly he should do with him, and first wants to know why he would even do such a horrific deed.
I want to know how you killed him. And I want to know if they knew it was happening to them. I want to know what they felt. I want to know if they hurt.
This is as perfect of a scenario as any to show the benefits of retributive justice. Here's some things to consider. 1. Tony has had his family taken away from him violently without just cause. 2. Tony knows that this is the man responsible but can't legally prove it, so law enforcement is unable to apprehend him. 3. According to Detective Bobby, this isn't the first time Ray has done something like this, and from Ray's lack of remorse or concern, it's likely he has and will do it again.
It's fun to kill people. You of all people should try it sometime.
Fun? Did you have fun killing my wife and daughter?
4. Ray won't be missed. To our knowledge, he doesn't have any type of family who depend on him and would be harmed by his death. 5. I think everyone can agree that Ray objectively needs some kind of punishment for his actions that he isn't receiving now. And 6. Will revenge actually bring peace of mind to Tony if he gets it? Even if you still have moral reservations with Tony killing Ray, I think you still have to admit that some part of you understands the appeal for eye for an eye justice in this isolated scenario. The idea of Ray being put through even a fraction of the pain that he's caused just feels right. Since some people will still have the belief that further murder in this case would be wrong, I wonder what people would think about the idea of capturing Ray and holding him as a prisoner, since the law won't be able to incarcerate him, and for the purpose of preventing him from committing further crimes. Would holding him against his will in some kind of makeshift prison cell in one of those abandoned shacks be ethical? You would be taking away his freedom and violating his rights, but you can argue that he forfeited those privileges when he raped and killed Tony's wife and daughter. So if the criminal justice system can't apprehend him, maybe Tony should. With all the reasons and justifications laid out here, this seems like one of the best scenarios one could have to justify retributive justice.
There's nothing professional about what you do. I kill when I have to, on the job.
Oh, so it's okay to take a life as long as you get a paycheck for it?
The city pays me to keep the law.
I've got news for you, Sergeant. My code requires a higher standard of proof than your city's laws. At zero cost to the taxpayer, you ask me, I'm a bargain.
Utilitarianism is the ethical theory that focuses on the outcome of actions to determine their moral worth by how much overall happiness or well-being they can provide, rather than on the actions themselves. This framework generally sounds pleasing to everybody, but there are applications where it could be very demanding. A famous thought problem that exposes a flaw in this ideology is, imagine there are 5 patients in a hospital that all need organs donated to them and will die soon because none are available. You're in the lobby waiting for a routine checkup and happen to be a healthy match for them. Now, is the doctor morally justified to kill you to save these other 5 patients? Is your single life more important than helping these other people? I imagine numerous reasons spring to mind in defense of your life. Like, maybe you have people or family members that love and depend on you, or that the doctor would be taking away your rights as a human by sacrificing you against your will. There's a version of utilitarianism that attempts to fix this problem by saying that we ought to live by rules that in general are likely to lead to the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This ethical theory now sounds very similar to deontological ethics, which concludes that the morality of an action should be based on whether that action itself is right or wrong under a series of rules or laws. So the difference between rule utilitarianism and deontological ethics seems to be that utilitarianism focuses more on the outcome being good for most people, while deontology focuses on the actions themselves. It's easy to find the outcome of murderers like Dexter Morgan or the Punisher to be favorable and a good thing for society, but I think some of the hesitation to fully endorse them is from not wanting to give one person the power of being judge, jury, and executioner. And their lifestyle can also put other people in harm's way. They may have to kill innocent witnesses to their crime in order for them to get away with it. Or they could endanger those close to them who didn't choose to live this dangerously. The consequentialist outcome of someone like Dexter's actions do have good outcomes to consider. He's mainly killing repeat offenders that have no interest in changing their behavior, and he is stopping the deaths of more innocent victims by killing them. An interesting nuance in Dexter's case is that he works for the police department, and he's able to find people to murder quite easily. And he can use DNA evidence to ensure that he's killing the right person. But he isn't doing it because he wants to make the world a better place. He is just channeling his desire to kill towards bad people so that it's easier for him to get away with it. So it could be a case of him doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Something else to consider is that he often withholds evidence from the police so that he can later on hunt them down for himself. So the criminal justice system would have actually apprehended a good amount of them thanks to his forensic expertise. And for what most of them would have been charged with, they likely wouldn't be free on the streets anytime soon. So how much was Dexter actually helping society by stealing them for his table? Alternatively, what if they did get imprisoned? They likely wouldn't die, at least from the law, because the number of criminals that are put on death row is fairly low, with less than 1% of them actually being executed. So it's likely that they would just be sitting in prison instead. Therefore, you could argue that they are a burden to the taxpayer and are taking up resources that could be spent on helping the lives of decent citizens.
Those men on that boat, they made their choices. They chose to murder and steal. It doesn't make any sense for us to have to die too.
It also just doesn't sit well with people that some killers and rapists can cause so much suffering to others and then only be punished by a lengthened time out in prison. Of course, the horrors of the prison system amount to much more than that, but I can understand the point of view of thinking that way. It just doesn't feel like justice. It doesn't feel like they got proportionate punishment to the damage they caused.
The man who pulls the lever that breaks your neck will be a dispassionate man. And that dispassion is the very essence of justice. For justice delivered without dispassion is always in danger of not being justice.
Deontological ethics, as I mentioned earlier, focuses on the action itself being right or wrong to consider its morality, regardless of what the outcome will be. This moral framework can be found in Desmond Doss in Hacksaw Ridge. Set in World War II, Desmond willingly joins the army, but refuses to carry a weapon. He's a pacifist and doesn't believe in taking a human life under any circumstances.
It isn't right that other men should fight and die, that I would just be sitting at home safe. I need to serve. I got the energy and the passion to serve as a medic. Right in the middle with the other guys, no less danger, just while everybody else is taking life, I'm gonna be saving it.
When someone stands by their convictions like this, despite the horrific danger they will be putting themselves in, it's somewhat courageous. Even if you don't agree with what he's doing, the fact that he's standing by his morals and is even risking being court-martialed is an admirable fortitude to witness. However, his noble actions through deontological ethics could have bad outcomes as well. Out on the battlefield, he gets separated from his unit and goes down into a crater. He comes across a Japanese soldier who is gravely injured. Even though he is the enemy and was likely trying to kill him and his regiment earlier, Desmond applies first aid to him and even gives him some precious morphine to ease his pain. However, Desmond's application of deontological ethics here could put more people in danger. He is using scarce resources on an enemy soldier. What if he later on comes across his commander or a fellow comrade and now he's out of supplies? Desmond views all life as sacred, but if his actions result in the US Army not being able to defend the home that he originally signed up to save, then his compassionate act would do more harm than good. What if Desmond came across someone so high rank in the Japanese army that their death would essentially end the war, or perhaps more realistically, that battle? With Desmond's morals, he likely wouldn't kill that man, even though in the long run, it would potentially save hundreds of thousands of lives. So, is deontological ethics always the best theory to live by? There's also the point of view that philosopher Bernard Williams has that says, no moral theory ought to demand the taking of an innocent life. In the case of killing this Japanese general to end the war, if he wasn't immediately trying to kill Desmond, you could argue that in that moment, he is innocent. Should Desmond murder someone for crimes they have yet to commit? And as a pacifist, Desmond wouldn't want to kill him just for the past wrongs that he's done. It isn't Desmond's fault that the world is having this war and that people are choosing to fight each other violently. So why should he have to corrupt his own morals?
It's not about vengeance. It's not about retaliation or balancing the books. It's about something deep inside.
Does rehabilitation really work? At what point does the idea of helping reform a disturbed individual morph into putting down an evil monster that has no hope of changing? And why isn't rehabilitation as satisfying as retributive justice? I think part of why is because rehabilitation isn't a certainty. We don't have any kind of therapy or futuristic implant that 100% cures someone of their evil urges. It's also just a lot more work. It takes time, effort, money, and resources to rehabilitate someone, while the alternative of just killing them can be almost instantaneous. However, trying to rehabilitate seems to feel like a more hopeful alternative. Bringing up the nuanced character of Dexter Morgan again, he provides several interesting perspectives around rehab. Could he have been rehabilitated after what happened to him as a child? And based on how he channels his desires to kill towards criminals, should we even want him to be? If Dexter didn't have his father reinforcing his beliefs that he's a monster his whole life and helping him channel his urges, maybe he would have turned out differently. Harry was happy to be able to use Dexter to get justice in the times where the law failed. Harry wanted Dexter to be able to get away with his urges, but he also couldn't stand seeing what he created.
The idea of a code was one thing, a grand idea, a noble cause, but the reality of it. Harry walked in on what he created, and he couldn't live with himself.
If Harry had put more time and effort into helping Dexter get rid of those dark urges, is it possible he would have eventually overcame them? Or, as he grew up, would he just have to hide those feelings from his father the best he could? If he had done that, he'd likely have ended up a serial killer, more similar to his brother, Brian Moser, who just kills people because he likes it and thinks it's fun. Harry did seek out professional help for Dexter by taking him to a psychologist, but in this case, she believed that serial killers were remnants of alpha wolves and necessary for society, so she wasn't very helpful in curbing those feelings within Dexter. Once you have an urge or compulsion that tempting and powerful, what are the odds that you can get rid of it? People struggling with other strong urges, like substance abuse or sexual paraphilias, describe the battles with those feelings as being lifelong and dreadful. Even with the societal punishments they would receive if they were to act on their urges, or even their own moral problems with the behavior, oftentimes the feelings are still strong enough to get them to act on them, or to cause them to take their own life to free themselves from that burden. The idea that Dexter could get enough help to never hurt another human being again does seem a little far-fetched, based on how badly he wants to kill. And at the very least, he would be struggling with those feelings and suffering with not being able to act on them his whole life.
I wanted to kill him, Dad.
It must have been tough for you to walk away, son. I'm proud that you did that.
Don't be. Because I still want to kill him. When's that gonna go away?
So there is an argument that maybe filtering his aggression towards violent, reoffending criminals might be what's best for him. However, redemption can still happen, and Dexter witnesses this in Brother Sam. He's an ex-con who got away with murder and now spends his time atoning for his sins and helping other criminals change their lives for the better. Before all this, Dexter was about to put Sam on his table, but he got arrested and was out of Dexter's grasp. After Dexter and Sam have formed a relationship, Sam tells Dexter that he forgives the man who shot him, and because of that, it looks like Dexter was actually going to let the killer live, but the killer is unrepentant and laughs in Dexter's face, which then unleashes the wrath of his dark passenger.
I can't believe this worked out, man.
I think the hope of wanting to rehabilitate and change people is an admirable thing to strive towards. It's just hard to know when that might actually work and when offenders need to be at least permanently separated from society. This coincides with the more compassionate approach of restorative justice, which entails having the wrongdoer make amends with the victimized party or society, rather than making the culprit suffer. A quick scenario where this is demonstrated is in the prison show Oz. Miguel blinded this prison guard named Eugene and is now in a position where he can train a guard dog for him and talk to him face to face about why he did such a heinous act. The best case scenario for restorative justice is that the victim feels better about being able to confront and question the offender and hopefully find peace of mind. And it also makes it so the offender can take accountability for what they did and become a more compassionate person. But if either party is uncooperative, then it could just be a waste of time and could actually make the victim feel even worse than before. So restorative justice on its own might not always succeed, but I think it's also worth trying.
Men get arrested. Blocks get put down.
In late 2021, in Germany, there was this 100-year-old man named Joseph Schutz, who was a former concentration camp guard who went to trial for assisting in the murder of approximately 3,518 prisoners. He first joined the war when he was 21 in 1942, and now, almost 80 years later, he was finally brought up to trial for his crimes. This produced divided outcry from the public, with some saying that he's just a frail old man now, and others declaring that he must pay for the atrocities that he was a part of. It seems like the thirst for retributive justice has no expiration date. So what would be the reasons for punishing this man 80 years later? 1. For accountability and justice. Crimes during the Holocaust are some of the most heinous and abominable acts in history, and perpetrators have to be held responsible. 2. Deterrence and public condemnation. Punishing war criminals, no matter how long ago their actions were, can serve as a deterrence to potential future perpetrators and shows the public that society has moral standards that they will be held accountable to. 3. Closure for the victims. For the survivors of such a horrible treatment, seeing a former Nazi brought to trial and convicted could give them a sense of closure and acknowledgement for their suffering. Now, what are some of the reasons against punishing him? 1. His age and frailty. He is 100 years old and is no longer a threat to anybody, and in all honesty, will probably die soon anyways. He now has a whole different life from wartime and has loved ones who care about him. 2. Available evidence. Again, he's being put on trial for crimes that happened 80 years ago. A lot of evidence like documents, deceased witnesses, and unreliable memories could make it difficult to prove without a shadow of a doubt that this is the man responsible for the crimes he's being accused of. In a quote from the trial, he says, "I pulled up trees, planted trees," saying he never even wore a German uniform. I don't have any of the available evidence that the prosecution would be presenting, so maybe they do have reliable evidence, but its authenticity should still be questioned. 3. The punishment is only symbolic. With his advanced age and being confined to a wheelchair, he isn't a threat to anybody, so any punishment wouldn't prevent further crime. It would just cause pain to an old man. And wouldn't it be more positive to focus on reconciliation with society rather than opening up old wounds and trying to get a conviction of this elder, rather than current criminals who are still harming innocents? In 2022, at 101 years old, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Was this the right thing to do? And how much justice came from convicting this man for such a short amount of time in the last years of his life? For those that love retributive justice, is the satisfaction of this outcome the same as it would be to a currently dangerous criminal being killed or taken off the streets? And would you want to be the one doing the killing, or would you only endorse others to do it? Of course, in a functioning society, we can't have numerous normal citizens killing people because they think it's the right thing to do. With so many murderous vigilantes, how could we ensure that everybody that gets killed actually deserves it, or is even responsible for whatever crime they're being punished for? Everybody will have their own versions of what qualifies someone for death. If you put Dexter Morgan, Frank Castle, Jason Todd, and Wade Wilson in a room together, what would be the consensus on who should walk out alive? Not in a comic book fight to the death scenario, but thinking about what each of them would think about the other's moral justification for murder. There would of course be overlap because, in general, all these people only kill criminals who deserve it and escape the criminal justice system. But some of these vigilantes don't have irrefutable DNA evidence that the criminals are 100% responsible, like someone like Dexter usually does. So I wonder if he would think that any of them should die, or would Dexter think that what they're doing is good enough, even if they are occasionally mistaken. Maybe the amount of justifiable killings they do outweigh the few times they get it wrong. And it's not like the criminal justice system never wrongfully convicts or kills people either. In season 4 of Dexter, when he accidentally kills an innocent photographer, he feels horrible about breaking his code. But I doubt he would want to be killed for his mistake, since he's normally so thorough. I think it's important to show that even amongst murderers, they aren't going to fully agree with who is killed, and eventually they might get in each other's crosshairs. So if vigilantism became more popular in the real world, things would get very chaotic, with everybody just taking the law into their own hands. But if it's just a few here and there, then is it really so bad?
True courage is about knowing not when to take a life, but when to spare one.
Something that I've seen most people morally condone is the act of torturing someone to save innocent lives. I think there are situations where it's morally acceptable to deliberately make someone as uncomfortable as needed when they are withholding information that could save people, because the lives of the people they deliberately endangered take precedence over their personal right to not be harmed. A perfect film to analyze the "what if they're wrong" aspect of torture is from the movie Prisoners. 2 little girls get kidnapped, and then one of the fathers, Keller Dover, takes matters into his own hands when the police release the prime suspect. I mentioned earlier how we often condone torture when we know we have the right person, and all it takes is making them feel pain for innocent lives to be saved. But Keller doesn't actually know that this person is responsible for taking his daughter. Additionally, Alex's brain is underdeveloped and he's mentally handicapped, so he comes across as really odd and suspicious to Keller. Keller then takes him hostage and proceeds to beat and presumably starve him to get him to reveal where his daughter's being kept. What are Keller's justifications for inflicting this hellish torment onto someone, especially onto a person that literally has the mind of a child? 1. In the parking lot, when Alex is released, he whispers to Keller, "They didn't cry until I left them," which of course sounds like a confession, but in Alex's warped view of the world, he could be saying this because this entire unusual circumstance is like a game to him. Or maybe similar to people with Tourette's, his brain just forces him to say the most inappropriate and offensive things possible when he is in tense situations. He seems to be really shy and reserved in earlier scenes, but maybe this stressful situation is taking a toll on his undeveloped mind. 2. When the police initially find the RV, Alex attempts to drive away and then gets caught. Keller sees this as a sign of guilt, and again, this could be Alex just reacting with fear. 3. When Keller is staking out Alex's home, he sees him walking his dog. As he follows him, he hears him singing the same song his daughter sung on Thanksgiving.
Jingle bells, brightly smells, rock blazing.
Alex.
So Alex's socially awkward behavior, mental handicap, and singing of a popular children's song are what justify Keller to brutalize him within an inch of his life. Now, of course, in the end, Alex does actually have some complicity in the taking of his daughter with the help of his Aunt Holly. but I don't think he should be held accountable for his actions with such severity. Alex was abducted as a child himself, so it seems like he's been indoctrinated by his aunt to behave the way he does, and his underdeveloped mind doesn't know any better. Also, Keller's torture of Alex wasn't even worth it because he got no information out of him. But what if Alex had given some useful clue to Keller? Would it now be justified to torture the information out of this person with the mind of a child? From a utilitarian perspective, you could say yes, because he's torturing him to save the life of his daughter and his daughter's friend. But this type of thirst for justice doesn't seem as honorable or righteous as it is in some of the other revenge films I've mentioned. I think Retributive Justice holds a captivating allure for people because its eye for an eye intuition seems straightforward and fair, but there are many factors to consider about the ethical implications to ensure the outcome is justifiable and to provide a deserving punishment to people. With the way society is structured, it's likely we won't see vengeance depicted in real life the same way we do in film. So, at the very least, its portrayal and popularity in film continue to be a captivating fantasy. If you want to support this channel even further, consider joining my Patreon. You can participate in monthly Q&As and get insight to what I'm working on next. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon.